Welcome all to the silver edition of Cutter Simpsons Unhinged. As we are doing the 25th episode, and it's a very classic one. So let's go through the 25 ones I have done quickly. And yes, the playlist will be in the description, of course, if you're not looking at Cutter Simpsons Unhinged. I went through Lisa Goes Gaga about Lady Gaga ruining The Simpsons, that 90s show about Homer and Marge's time period thing, Homer and Bongo, season 24, Homer not trusting dogs or apes, Homer at the Bats, when we talked about the episode that beat The Cosby Show first run syndication when The Simpsons were on Thursdays. We talked about the Olympics episode in Vancouver because, that was around the Olympics when I talked about Maud Steph and how it changed Ned for the worse and maybe Homer for the worse. We talked about the 15th season Christmas episode in which Homer tries to fix things, but Ned becomes a jealous prick. Principal and the Pauper, yeah, I talked about that episode. I had to because, I jumped the shark. And was it really a good show episode? We talked about Homer and Apu, a Pooh-centric episode. Lisa the vegetarian, how they had to get Paul McCartney by making Lisa vegetarian. Love is the many strangled thing, where the Simpsons keep trying to justify Bart being strangled. Todd Warehouse 5 Forsaking Me, about Todd losing his faith in God after he takes mod. Lisa gets an F1 when Lisa decides to be an F1 racer. The gay marriage episode in which Patty comes out of the closet and how great it was. Diary Queen, the episode in which, Bart learns about Edna's diary and all that and feels good, but Lisa ruins it for some strange reason. We talked about that Family Guy episode in 2014 that paired them up with Springfield and how somehow in some way it may have given Springfield a second wind. Probably not what they were hoping for. Bart the Mother, when Bart and Marge have that thing over lizard eggs. The Italian double dip, how the B plot in one episode when Lisa tries to learn Italian turns into the A episode. They go to Italy and deal with Sergeant Bob. Homer's enemy when Simpsons basically cheer Homer, even though he was Sloveny, and hate on Frank Grimes, who was just trying to get things going. The famous 20th episode, Kill Gil, in which we talked about Marge's mental breakdown. Of course, everything that's huge. Real Gems hasn't done anything about that. I don't know why. The Simpsons movie, I talked about that in full about Homer's plot and all that and things. Homer and Ned's Hail Mary, it was a Super Bowl episode that kind of was okay, I guess. We talked about Trash of the Titans and Springfield moving from place to place and all that, probably on purpose and all that because it makes sense with the geography. And last Saturday, I talked about the one with FIFA. So that's that. So this week we're going to be talking about a famous two-parter. That's Geraldo. Yeah, right. Like I'm going to talk about that. Nope, we're not. We're talking about the OG two-parter. One of the best two-parters ever that took part and ended season 6 and started season 7. That's right. We're talking about Who Shot Mr. Burns for this 25th silver edition of Cutter Simpsons Unhinged. And by the way, you know, I actually did drawings and all that. I now know the next 5 episodes up to number 30 and all that. Just to let you know that, yeah, I'll talk about the next 5 episodes because there is time. It is time constraint in a sense. But anyway, yeah, we're going to talk about Who Shot Mr. Burns and we're going to talk about some narratives to it. Jerk Homer, Marge's worries, Bart's pranks, Lisa's causes, Maggie not talking a lot, Grandpa being senile, Patty and Selma boring Marge, Artie Sif is a jerk, Chief Wiggum making things happen, Mr. Burns being a dick. You can never stop the Simpsons. Heaven knows they've been trying for years and they still come back for more. 37 seasons is a bit much, don't you think? It's a crazy Simpsons. Something happens. A do 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 do. This is not a clip show. Have no fear. I've got topics for years. In this picture, you see Mr. Burns sprawled out on the sundial and many Simpsons characters. Wondering what the heck is Mr. Burns doing on that sundial? Well, Let's talk about it. It's going to be hard because, I got to talk about the two-parter. So part one of Who Shot Mr. Burns was season 6, episode 25. This is the season 6 episode I'm looking at. Because season 7, of course, I talked about the episode with Lisa the Vegetarian, and then, of course, Mother Simpson will come up soon. But, so on May 21st, 1995, to end this 6th season of The Simpsons, we see Principal Skinner and Groundskeeper Willie trying to start a new school day, but Groundskeeper Willie has to bury a hamster from Krabappel's glass. So, trying to bury the dead gerbil, there's oil and all that. Unfortunately, though, the paper comes out with awful school gets awful rich, and of course Skinner tries everything to try to prevent Simpson and Chalmers from finding out that article and all that. So the school is happy; they got the money for the oil money, so they get to have suggestions to spend their newfound wealth, including hiring Tito Puente as a music teacher per Lisa's suggestion. Um, Ralph suggests chocolate microscopes. In the meantime, at the Springfield power plant, Homer is increasingly angry that Mr. Burns can never remember his name and all that. So Homer actually does doll himself up in his work hat, his hard hat, his lunchbox, and has a button on his shirt saying, "Hi, my name is Homer Simpson." And Mr. Burns, after learning about the school's oil and wanting to destroy it because, you know, he wants money and an energy monopoly over Springfield. He comes out of the weight club room and then greets Lenny, Carl, Guillermo, and then Homer. He taps the stuff, but he's not doing it. Lenny and Carl tell him, "Don't worry about it, Homer. He always forgets people's names." And Guillermo says, "You know my son Ronaldo? He called him Ronaldo." And of course, Homer is upset. So Mr. Burns, after realizing everything, decides to try to dress himself like Jimbo so that, the drilling rights to have an energy monopoly. However, Skinner's not fooled, and Mr. Burns says, "I'll get my money back." So, anyway, Homer, of course, is mad and then finds out Marge. And then Marge says, "Why don't you send Mr. Burns a box of chocolates with a picture of the Simpson family underneath the candy?" So, anyway, they do that. Mr. Burns and Smithers open up with the chocolates. And the first person is Maggie. Mr. Burns recognizes her as the one who found Bobo, his childhood toy teddy bear, for him. And then the Simpson Mutt, of course, he doesn't know the name, but it's a little helper. It was one of his guard dogs at one time. And then recognizes Marge as the lady who painted him in the nude. Bart, who was once Burns' heir, and talks about Lisa, but actually, I found this out years ago that Lisa and Burns didn't have a key episode with each other through the first 6 seasons before this episode. So it's like, how did he know Lisa's name? I guess through Bart? I don't know. But unfortunately, the candy covering Homer's face is not eaten. Burns does send a thank you card to Marge, Bart, Lisa, and Maggie. And Homer says, "Kids, go outside." And then he yells a profanity that gets clouded out by the church bell. We all know it's "fuck." And and Ned says that's the loudest swear he's ever heard. Anyway, Burns decides to take the school's oil, despite Smithers' disapproval. He has a slam drilling operation and beats the school to tapping the oil well, meaning that the school will lose their oil, their newfound wealth, and worst of all, the school will have to make cuts. Groundskeeper Willie tears off his shirt after talking to the teacher, says, "Oh, wound the Miss Pippins, and also Mr. Smithers." And of course, Tito Forte is not there. So, anyway. However, Mr. Burns' drilling operation causes distress. The first burst of oil from Mr. Burns' rig actually lands on Bart's treehouse. Maggie points Marge out to the carnage in which Bart is hurt, and Sansa the Helper is stuck under parts of the treehouse. So Sansa the Helper now has to be in a wheelchair and all that. Bart vows revenge, even though that Nelson and his bird ha at them. Moe's Tavern is closed because of the fumes from the drilling, even though that Moe and Barney contribute to a lot of the fumes, and the Springfield retirement castle is broken. So that means that everyone has to move back with their families, including Grandpa. Grandpa does take his Smith & Wesson gun, gives it to Bart. Bart doesn't know what to do with it, and then Marge says, Bart, give me that gun. I'm going to bury it where prying hands can't get it. And Grandpa says, berates Bart, saying, why didn't you shoot in the air? She would have ran. So anyway, Mr. Burns then finds out this is the tip of the iceberg. He decides to plan a sun blocker that will block up the sun's spectrum, meaning that the residents have to use his electricity. Smithers finally decides to tell Mr. Burns off, and Burns fires him. Homer then decides to sneak into Burns' office after being bit too many times and paints I am Homer Simpson on the wall. But Mr. Burns still doesn't talk about his name and all that. Homer gets in a rage and all that. Everyone swears vengeance on Mr. Burns' schemes. So, of course, that means that there's a town hall meeting. Everyone yells about what Burns has done. Even Marge says he's causing us all to yell. And Bart says, look what he did to my best friend. And we pan to Millhouse eating potato chips. No, not him. My dog. And then he's squeaking with his wheelchair. And then Mr. Burns laughs maniacally and says, how about I sound some oil? You sick monster. Then Burns pulls out a gun. I'm carrying this gun because of an unnamed Bacillion. No, says Homer. Anyway, he then decides to say, have you ever seen the sun go out at 3 o'clock in the afternoon? Captain McAllister says, aye, out in the international date line. No one asked you. And so he blocks out the sun, and then now everyone will now have to be consumed with his energy and all that. He feels like celebrating. Krusty actually pulls up and says he was in Vegas for a while. He walks in the parking lot, and his shadow talks to somebody off screen. We don't know who it is, and then he ends up getting shot. Of course, Marge is looking for her family because she can't find her family. Skinner leaves Agnes unattended, and where's Mr. Smithers? And then there's a gun firing. Mr. Burns stumbles. Jimbo tries to ask for help, but Burns says, I will not dignify that with a response, and collapses onto the sundial. Everyone sees him, and that basically everyone in Springfield has the motive and means to shoot Mr. Burns. Of course, one thing you will see, if you really see well enough at the end, near the end of that episode, is there's Krusty standing next to Ned, and Ned looks at Krusty, and Krusty looks angrily. Doesn't that look like Homer? Nevertheless, um, Dr. Hibbert basically points at through the fourth wall at the viewer. Nope, he's pointing at Wiggum. Wiggum has an investigation. So it ends May 1995 and ends season 6. We will have to wait till mid-September 1995, when I was 10 years old, to find out who shot Mr. Burns. The police search for his assistant. Smithers actually has some kind of drunken dream about him and Mr. Burns being 60s detectives at a speedway. Anyway, Lisa tells about how everyone in the family is definitely a suspect. Bart, because, he injured Santa's helper. Homer, because he can't remember Homer's name. Marge, for some reason, I think she doesn't say much. But then Bart says, what? How about you, sister suspect? Well, yeah, because he ruined the school's money and I couldn't have Tito Puente. But I wouldn't do that. I'm incapable of it. And Grandpa actually says that anyone is capable of murder and all that. I did something to a French Legion thing. Anyway, Marge actually finds Grandpa's gun unburied and all that. And Grandpa does have the gun next to him. Anyway, Smithers thinks he shot somebody. So he goes to a Catholic church and pleads guilty to the crime. And Wiggum. And Chief Wiggum then tells him, that's all I need to hear. Hey, this stuff is great. So Smithers does shoot somebody. and all that, in the lake, and all that. Smithers is interviewed and says something about "Pardon My Singer," about Madonna. Krusty goes bonkers because he's stealing his joke, and the mouse says, "You stole that from Pardon My Singer." And then they both realize that Smithers never misses the episode. So that means that obviously he could not have done it. Smithers did shoot somebody. He shot Jasper in his wooden leg, and Jasper is okay with it. All that. In the meantime, Grandpa uses Homer's outhouse, which is actually the tool shed. And then after that, the town actually pulls down the sunblocker, and it crushes Shelbyville to their delight. So anyway, Lisa actually feels like she could eliminate some suspects. Marge is a little suspicious, saying, maybe you shouldn't get involved in something like this. How about you find out who put that mud in our freezer? And then Bart comes out with 2 bowls of ice cream. Who wants chocolate ice cream? Me, me, me. And it was Bart, obviously. So Lisa gets a list of people that could have done it. Tito Puente is fingered by Wiggum, but when he and his group sing a song about Mr. Burns, he should be hurt, but they wouldn't shoot him. He's cleared. Phew. Anyway, Skinner was asked about it. He actually said he was going to ambush Mr. Burns with his ambush gear, but he grabbed the wrong makeup. He grabbed Agnes's makeup. And Superintendent Chalmers walks in on him and all that. Wiggum says, and Superintendent Chalmers can vouch for you? Yes, but whatever else he says is a lie. Willie gets talked to. He says he was physically incapable of operating a firearm because of playing Space Invaders in 1977. Wiggum thinks it's his video game. What is his video game? And also, Willie does the cross-leg scene from Basic Instinct. Mo is there, and Mo is hooked up to a polygraph machine. He didn't shoot Mr. Burns. And then they subject him to stuff that Mo is going to spend all night ogling the girls in the Sears catalog. And to me, it's like, why did you put these guys on a polygraph test and all that? It would have been much easier. So anyway, Wiggum still can't figure it out. So he decides to drink some warm cream. And then Lisa comes in, out of the Twin Peaks. Says, gee, Wiggum, don't need the clues. You know, those backwards talking thing I can't do. And then she says, look, Burns better suit. Suit better Burns. Burns his suit. Burns his suit. Look at Burns' suit. Yeesh. So Wiggum does. There's a hair on the suit. So he takes it to a forensics lab, bribes them with cigarettes, and then they actually know the forensics of the family. It lands on the Simpsons. And all that. And then Mr. Burns wakes up from his coma screaming, Homer Simpson, Homer Simpson. And then everyone's like, bingo, then South Civic has a name-o. So they raid the Simpson home and find a gun under the seat of the car, covered with Homer's fingerprints and loaded with bullets matching Burns' ones. So basically, Homer's arrested for attempted murder. However, Wiggum crashes the paddy wagon at Krusty Burger, and Homer escapes. Smithers offers a $50,000 reward. We find out that Homer's prints were on the gun because he was looking for his ice cream cone when he dropped it. Lisa then basically says, you know, all these things. Marge says that it's too little too late. Homer was fingered by Mr. Burns himself. The gun had his fingerprints on it, and they found his DNA. They found Simpson DNA. Any one of us could have done it. Well, except for you, because you're a Bouvier. And when Marge says that, no, no, no. When I was married to your father, I had to take some of his DNA. Okay, Mom. But there might be a factor. There are times in subsequent episodes that Homer and Marge are actually questioned as actually maybe they're blood relatives. Maybe they're not brother and sister. Maybe they're first cousins or whatever. There have been concerns about that. So that could be it. Marge could have blood ties with the Simpsons and doesn't even know it. So anyway, Lisa tries to return to the scene of the crime to investigate and finds a pigeon and with a clue and all that. Homer then finds a gun and decides to confront Mr. Burns. Everyone wants to destroy Homer. However, Lisa says, "My father's innocent. He wouldn't hurt a fly." But Homer is shaking Mr. Burns. Mr. Burns forgets Homer's name. Homer is enraged, grabs Chief Wiggum's pistol, and threatens to kill Mr. Burns. However, Mr. Burns says that Homer did not kill him or shoot him. He doesn't have the personal digits. He reveals the true assailant, Maggie Simpson. What? So anyway, Mr. Burns explains the story about him coming across Maggie eating a lollipop in the Simpsons car. Because Marge had just put Maggie and a injured Santa helper in the car and was looking for Homer, Bart, and Lisa. So Mr. Burns looks at Maggie and wants to steal the candy from the baby. Of course, Smithers thwarted his chances to steal candy from a baby, but Maggie refuses to let Burns win the struggle. It's like the one with Bobo. Like, Maggie outclasses Mr. Burns. As Burns got through the lollipop, the gun slipped from his holster into Maggie's hands and discharged. And of course, the gun would fall under the car seat and Homer would leave his fingerprints on it. And then Mr. Burns collapses on the sundial. And then Lisa goes, "And with your last ounce of strange, you pointed to W and S. Or, from your point of view, M and S. Maggie Simpson." So anyway, everyone wants to go back to normal, but Burns wants Maggie arrested. However, Wiggum says, "Yeah, right, Pops. Like any jury's going to convict Maggie. Maybe Texas." And Marge says, "This shooting's an accident." However, Maggie's eyes shift, and then when she goes, it goes bang, bang, bang. So thus ends the episode, and are we really surprised? Are we really going to take Maggie as the assailant from Mr. Burns? Really? Well, a lot of people probably were pissed, and this is 3 decades ago. So we're going to go through some narratives. I know, boo, hiss, cutter. But we're going to go through some narratives and some explanations of stuff through the wiki page for Sean Mr. Burns. Alright, so there's a lot of production and all that. There were some hidden clues. Or planned in part 1 if you solve the mystery. So this is what Wikipedia says. Almost every clock is actually 3 or 9 o'clock. Mr. Burns looks from his balcony and talks about stealing candy from a baby. The box of chocolates Homer sends Burns is lined with the Simpsons family photo, and Maggie's the first Simpson the audience sees, and Burns and Smithers recognize. Maggie actually holds a green lollipop before Burns is shot. Mr. Burns collapses the sundial, W and S. Of course, WS could have been Wayland Smithers. While there's others with W and S or M and F. Principal Skinner is W. Seymour Skinner. Smithers' full name is Wayland Smithers, WS. The Simpson bud is SM. Most is like MS. Central Mel SM. Anyway. Pardon My Singer is broadcast 3 o'clock weekdays on Comedy Central, at TV and Moo's Tavern. And of course, since Smithers doesn't miss the show, he couldn't be anywhere. There were some citizens stroking guns and all that. Smithers having a revolver, Moe with a shotgun, Skinner with a semi-automatic pistol, Barney a Derringer fake even has a revolver. And during the town hall scene, Mr. Burns says, "Who here has the guts to stop me?" Everyone actually glares, but look in reluctance. But Maggie does not stop her glare. There were a lot of alternate endings, and yeah, that weird Simpsons clip show 138 episode spectacular. They had clips of Barney, Tito, Puente, Mo, Apu, and even Cecil Halpers, the gunman, and William the Smithers is the culprit, and Smithers gets a 5% pay cut. Of course, there was a massive contest, calling 1-800-COLLECT and all that. Fox launched Springfield.com, 500,000 hits, and all that. But nobody got it right, obviously. Maggie was got it and all that. Springfield's Most Wanted actually was basically a tie-in before part 2 of Who Shot Mr. Burns. And, there were a lot of projections from Hollywood people. Homer on the casino told both 2-1 odds, Maggie 70-1. And some say that it was gimmicky, tacky, and groveling. And we all know about the Who Shot Mr. Burns thing and all that. Yeah, the contest, nobody won. There were a lot of alternate theories and all that. In April 2020, a viral post compared Krusty's appearance in the final scene of Part 1 to how Homer looked at Homie the Clown. And some say that Homer looked a lot like Krusty. All that. And said it was probably an animation error. And then later, episodes would actually poke fun at this thing. Season 9 is the Cartridge Family when Homer buys a gun. Marge is not too happy because, family shouldn't have a gun. Other than all that. The time Maggie shot Mr. Burns, and Homer says, I thought Smithers shot Mr. Burns. And Lisa said, well, that would have made more sense. Season 12, Day of the Jackanapes, when Central Bob hypnotizes Bart to try to kill Krusty. And Krusty, of course, quits the show because of all these network types trying to ruin it on his show. Marge says, it's great that a show goes out of bang like that. And then Smith comes rushing and says, Maggie shot Mr. Burns again. And then season 18, in that revenge dish served 3 times, like, anthology episode, Homer casually says that, well, when Marge says, when Homer goes after the rejection, she goes, Homer, what have you get caught? Then I will pin everything on Maggie. That's how I did it when I shot Mr. Burns. But anyway, yeah, the reception, it averaged 12.3 million viewers for part 2, first in its time slot. Entertainment Weekly in 2003 gave it 25th place for the top Simpsons episodes of all time. It was a great season with a cliffhanger and all that. Lots of people enjoyed it. But there are some narratives that we're going to share. I'm going to share. There's 6 of them. Well, the 6th one was long-term effects of the episode. Well, as I said, that, they mentioned it every so often. Mr. Burns being a prick. But of course, and Homer the Krusty is another narrative, is that, Homer looked like Krusty and all that. Probably Homer was trying to do all that. There was, of course, the narrative with Burns' greed and all that. And also, the real Jim's the guy that I poked fun at for not doing a March psychotic episode thingy. He did a series about certain characters being the one who shot Mr. Burns. Like, when you look at it, even Marge had a thing about it. And, when he talked about Marge, well, another one of the narratives was Marge's nervousness with Lisa investigating. It's like, Marge doesn't want Lisa to know. Does Marge know something we don't know? When the real Jims talked about Marge's point of view, said that probably that Bart may have done it, and Marge was trying to prevent anyone to find out that she may have aided Bart. And let's face facts. I mean, Marge was sexually accosted by Mr. Burns one time, and that maybe she shot Mr. Burns, and maybe Mr. Burns would have given her a break. Who knows? But yeah, he did all that. Of course, the narrative of Marge, Maggie being the conspirator, so, it was like shocking. It's almost always the one you don't suspect. And the last narrative is Burns forgetting Homer's name. I think Burns does this on purpose. I mean, look at all the clues Homer gives about his name, and Mr. Burns still doesn't do it. I think that Burns purposely mishandles Homer's name because Homer is a doofus, and Homer cost him the governor spot in season 2's 2 cars in every garage, 3 eyes on every fish. He still hasn't forgotten it. Homer definitely knows it. And Mr. Burns purposely gets Homer's name wrong as a way to get on Homer's nerves. He doesn't care about Homer at all. That's just how I look at it. I think that he purposely doesn't want to talk about Homer because Homer screwed him over. But of course, Mr. Burns can't really hire a new safety inspector because the new safety inspector is going to close down the plant. And since Homer's incompetence, he doesn't have to worry. But that's just how I look at it. The narrative I see is that there is no fucking way that a guy, even as senile as Burns, would not know Homer's name from those Clint Clinton hints. Like those, the freaking hard hat, the lunchbox, the button on his shirt. Burns is looking straight at him. There's no way he would have missed that. None. That's cats are meowing in the background. So anyway, that's the episode, and I think I did it faster than I anticipated. Anyway, so the next 5 weeks, I've got the episodes lined up. Next week, Saturday, June 20th, we're going to season 2, and we're going to the start of a tradition that the Simpsons have done every freaking year. Not a Christmas episode, but a Treehouse of Horror episode. I will be talking about the Treehouse of Horror season 2 episode and give you a rundown of great Treehouse of Horror anthology things from the past. And then the 27th, we're going to look at Homer's Phobia from season 8 because it's the end of Pride Month. July 1st, it's a Wednesday. It's a special episode because I'm off that day. So I will be talking about Canada's favorite Simpsons episode, Do Canada from season 30. And then the 4th of July, which lands on a Saturday, we're going to be talking about the Bart Mangle Banner from season 15. And yes, July 7th, don't miss it, the 30th episode, season 4. It's Marge versus the Monorail versus the Springfield Connection. Who won it better? I will let you know. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. I do.